Hey LinkedIn, and welcome back to Business Unusual. This is a live show brought to you by the LinkedIn News team where we're talking as a community about the changing nature of work. I'm your host, Caroline Fairchild, coming to you from my home office here in New York City. It's Thursday, July 30th, and here's a quick look at the top stories that are trending right now on LinkedIn.
Will you please unmute your microphones and raise your right hands? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God?
Yes.
Yes. I do.
Big tech CEOs testifying in Capitol Hill yesterday. The leaders of Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon joining the 6-hour Congress hearing virtually. The interrogation was part of a year-long investigation that could lead to heightened antitrust regulation in the tech world. And businesses are reopening right now, but the months of shutdowns because of the pandemic are having a big impact. Newly released numbers from the government showing the economy shake dramatically last quarter. The figures from the Commerce Department painting a grave picture, with GDP, or the value of goods and services, dropping almost 33% annually. Meanwhile, unemployment claims are climbing. The numbers of filings reached 1.43 million last week, making 19 weeks in a row that claims exceeded 1 million. For more stories like these, be sure to check out the news module to the right of your LinkedIn feed, which brings us to the poll that we have for you today in the stream. We want to know how you're feeling about working remotely in the long term. This is something that a lot of companies, Google is one putting their neck out, saying that they're going to be doing this until next summer. Do you think this is effective and sustainable? A, yes. B, no. C, are you on the fence? Let us know your vote in the stream, but more importantly, tell us how working from home is going for you. We'll reveal the results of the poll at the end of today's show. That brings us to today's main story. As the pandemic continues to have just a long-term impact on how companies are operating, leaders are having to rethink how work is done almost entirely. One of those leaders is Citi President Jane Fraser. She's been leading the bank's North American response to the crisis. I sat down with her last year when she was CEO of Citi Latin America. Fraser will be joining us to discuss how the virus is impacting the financial industry, how she's thinking about hiring through the crisis, and what leadership principles have gotten her through this challenging time. But before we bring on Jane, we want to hear from you. The whole point of this show is to have a conversation as a community about how work is changing. So say hello to each other in the stream. If you have questions for Jane about what the future of finance will look like, how she's leading through this challenging time, please let us know in the stream. We'll get your questions as well as your comments answered here on today's show. And with that, I want to bring on Citi President Jane to the show. Hi, Jane, welcome.
Thank you so much, and congratulations, Caroline, your 90th episode.
Well, this is a great guest. I've been looking forward to speaking with you all week. Let's start with the economy. We talked at the top of the show about the GDP numbers that are coming down and unemployment claims surging. Economists are saying that we're going to see growth coming into the third quarter, but what are you seeing on the ground?
I think the reality is we're seeing tremendous uncertainty. At its heart, this is an economic crisis caused by a health crisis. Until the health crisis is resolved, it's going to be very hard to resolve all the different economic issues. And so right now, as we look forward, we just have a lot of uncertainty. We do not know the shape, scale, and scope of the economic recovery that lies ahead. And I think that's an obvious point of concern.
I think if we had one buzzword for this crisis, it would be uncertainty. Uncertainty throughout this entire time. You're leading Citi's North American response to the crisis. Take me back to March. There's uncertainty now, but certainly there was even more uncertainty back in March when this pandemic really started to hit us, at least here in the US. What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced in the beginning?
Well, we were you can call it fortunate. We're very fortunate. We have a very large franchise in Asia. So back in January, we already began to see what might be coming to Europe and then into the US. And so we were able to prepare. And I think one of the couple of the different pieces we immediately took away was a set of principles. Our first principle had to be we had to keep our people safe. And I think all companies, you're drummed into you to put the client first. But in a pandemic, it has to be your people. And so we worked very, very quickly to try and buy every PC imaginable in order to get as many of our people to be able to work from home, and giving them PCs in jobs that were not traditionally ones that you thought of work from home. And we had to innovate quite a bit for that, make sure our infrastructure was strong enough. And that way, once we knew our people were safe, we were then able to focus on our clients. We could see as well again in Asia the importance of getting relief programs out for consumers and for our clients who were unemployed completely unexpectedly, who were being impacted. And the main thing that we did that I think we're most proud of, we gave $1,000 to every of our people around the world who are earning less than $60,000 of base salary every year, just to help them through it. Because I do think, these types of things, you have to look home first and then look externally.
You mentioned going on a mad dash to get PCs so that workers could work from home virtually overnight. The finance industry has this bad rap of being inflexible and not offering perks that, as they were called before the pandemic, like working from home. Yes. How is that changing right now for Citi in terms of how they're thinking about work from home? How's it going?
We always had about 20% of our people worked from home, particularly in call centers and a number of different jobs. But we had to think completely differently overnight about what we could innovate to make sure that as many people as possible were able to work from home. And those that were not, our branch staff, who are the people in the front line, we wanted to make sure that if they work when they're in the branches or individuals working in critical infrastructure for us, they were as safe as possible in the office. So we had to completely rethink. And as always, when that happens, there's some good and bad in that. But in that innovation, I think we recognize that the future certainly isn't what it used to be. And that the future of work is going to be very different, with a lot more flexibility for people to work from home or work in different locations and not always in the office for many, many more jobs.
And for those of you who are just joining the stream, this is Business Unusual, a live show where we're talking about the changing nature of work. I'm here with Citi President Jane Fraser, talking about the future of finance and its impact during the pandemic. I want to say hello to some members in the stream right now: Sarah, Devin, Nadine, Ken, Natalia. Thank you so much for joining us on Business Unusual. If you have questions or comments, please let us know in the stream and say hello to each other. Jane, the future of work, it was a big topic before the pandemic. I want to know, you personally, were there any trends that you saw pre-pandemic that you think are now shifting other than flexibility? And what do you think is really going to change coming out of this in terms of how work is done productively?
Yeah, I think it starts with digitization. That just got completely supercharged by the pandemic. So it was an acceleration. So what we thought would take 2, 3, 4 years even happened in 4 months. And a lot of that was around behaviors. So most people still came into the ATM machine to deposit a check. We now have the majority of our customers who will deposit their check on their mobile phone and don't come into a branch, don't go to an ATM machine. We've seen a huge increase in mobile login. We've seen a huge number of new platforms. So customers who we invited to say, if you need some relief in your payments, on your card, on your mortgage, etc., you could apply online. And when I think back to the last crisis, there was no way that was done in 2 clicks on a digital platform. So I think we've seen digital platforms, customer engagement, all of these different dimensions really accelerated. And I've watched it with our corporate clients who initially were concerned about making sure that they had the balance sheet strength to get through the pandemic. And now the discussions are all about what is the future of their business, how much has the business model changed? And I think it's quite dramatic for quite a few different industries, and banking is certainly one of them.
You mentioned an increase in online banking. My husband and I were actually out walking around with our masks on yesterday, and we went to get cash out of an ATM, and he said to me it's the first time he's been in a bank since April.
Yes.
Which gets to a question that I have in the stream right now from Judy, who says, has Citi begun to rethink branch strategy, prudentially with reduction in branch sizes, number of branches, et cetera? How are you thinking about the physical imprint of the company?
Yeah, during the actual pandemic, we put in what we called a buddy system, so that we were still having our branch network open, but we wouldn't have every branch. And so where you have branches near each other, we'd have some open and others closed, again, keeping our people safe, but also reflecting the lower activity. As we look going forward, unquestionably, the branches and the physical network will play a different role. I think we'll see people coming in for advice. Human interaction is still going to be very important, but much more of the servicing, if I can call it the chores of financial services, which sometimes we're done by customers coming into our branches, that is going to get done a lot more at home because the customers will realize how much easier it is to do it that way. But when they want guidance, when they want advice, when you've got a real problem and you want to look someone in the eye, that trusting relationship, that will not change from this. And I know the branch isn't dead yet.
Yeah, I saw a bunch of branch managers all with masks on, but there seemed to be still some client interaction. Is it the end of the handshake, though? That's my follow-up question for you, Jane. Is it going to be a long time before that's how we seal deals?
I strongly suspect so. I think health, safety, and security is going to be a thing that endures. And it's affecting our discussion around how do we maintain the life and spirit of an office. I know, we all miss the daily fix of collegiality from interacting. Zoom is wonderful and the different platforms are wonderful and they're very effective. And I think we've all been surprised by how effective it is. But at the end of the day, if banking is a customer service business, banking is a relationship business, it's also an apprenticeship business. And apprenticeship over Zoom is hard. So I do believe we will be back in the office in the longer run in some form, but it will be different.
Right. Well, let's talk about office reopenings a little bit. Citi had plans to reopen offices in about 13 states and then pulled back those plans. Putting aside safety, of course, once it's safe, you'll return to the office. But paint a picture for how you guys are planning for that, what it's going to look like in the office and how it will be different.
Yes, we have a what we call an etiquette guide for the office, and that's not because I'm British and like good manners, but it's around helping people understand what are the different ways to make sure that they will be safe and that how they should be behaving in the office. So simple things such as when you walk in the front door, there's temperature screening. How do you get in an elevator and how do you behave in an elevator? So we've got different footprints around. We have guides for people as to where to go. In the offices, we've moved from sitting next to each other to what we call the checkerboard. And obviously there is going to be a lot more glass and perspex and others around to provide the protections. But we've seen from Asia and we've seen from parts of Europe that have gone back ahead of us in the States. There's a lot of lessons there. It's amazing how adaptable and flexible people are. And you get used to these new behaviors the same way as we got used to new security in airports. And it just became the way of doing things. So I am an optimist that when we do go back, it'll be strange for a little bit, but then we'll get used to it.
It will be strange, particularly for, say, employees who are new to Citi, who've just been hired. Hiring is a big topic right now, and how companies who are dealing with the uncertainty of the pandemic are deciding what roles to fill and when. How are you prioritizing that and thinking about what roles to fill? What roles are open at Citi right now in terms of the talent that you're looking for?
We've been very active. In fact, we just had the joy of our summer interns have been in, who just give this blast of wonderful energy to the place. And it's been all remote and a hugely diverse group, which we're very proud of. And this is their last week in. We have given offers to 75% of them to come back and join us. And we really haven't paused recruiting. There was a pause for a little bit just while we got everybody safe, either in the office or at home. But I myself have been very active. We've been bringing some wonderful talent from a few of our competitors. We've been moving people around the world still, keeping the mobility alive. Caroline, I'd say the biggest challenge is belonging. You can do plenty of interviews on Zoom, and it feels almost the same as the one-on-one interviews. You can bring someone to join the firm, but how do you get them to feel that sense of belonging and those soft pieces like understanding the purpose of the firm, the sense of culture, the apprenticeship, the feedback, these other dimensions? And that's the one that requires, you have to be very thoughtful about it. And you have to put in a lot of personal time into it. something I enjoy and have enjoyed doing. But you really have to be very deliberate about it, because otherwise it becomes very sterile. And in this environment, you need that emotional connection with the people around you and who you're working with.
Well, I'm seeing some Citi employees in the stream who are feeling that. Greta says, I've been working at Citi for 23 years, and I couldn't be more proud of how we have continued to manage through COVID. I wholeheartedly believe that our success and the positive response is a direct result of Jane's leadership through us. So Greta, thank you for joining us on the show. Sure, that makes you feel happy to hear employees saying things like that about your leadership. So that's great. That brings me to how you're managing employees remotely and how you're supporting them through this time. I actually want to bring up one of your recent shares on LinkedIn where you were talking about just how challenging it is for working parents. You wrote, to my fellow women, we know the load many of you are carrying right now is stressful. You're juggling work and home like never before. Jane, as you probably assume, this is a huge topic right now on LinkedIn, working parents, particularly as school reopenings are uncertain. How are you thinking about that, and how are you supporting particularly parents throughout this time?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've been talking about is wherever we can, we're providing flexibility. We have slightly fewer than 3% of our people working in the office right now in Citi. And we've been surprised how well it has worked working remotely. And therefore, this has given us the ability to give people much more flexibility. We knew the two issues. We're going to be commuting on public transport and childcare and schooling. And with the uncertainty for the return to school, and actually what will school be like in the fall, and then as we enter flu season later on in the year into next year, it's a huge concern. And our intention is to continue to provide our people as much flexibility and support they can, particularly for mothers, but there are plenty of fathers who are in the same boat. Be understanding about this, provide some different benefits, try and provide some different support around it. But the main piece is, give them the security that you can continue on working from home if you need to.
Mm-hmm. And these are pre-pandemic problems. The lack of support for working parents, it particularly hurts women and their ability to advance in their careers. There's never been a female CEO of a major US bank. As you're thinking about diversity right now, particularly amid protests against racial injustices, is this going to be a turning point in terms of how we're thinking about the leaders that we're putting in charge of our institutions and making them look a little bit more like the populations that they serve?
I think we all hope so. It's certainly been, I think, a moment, particularly with the racial inequality and inequity that's there. Our CFO is Black, a wonderful friend of all of us on the management team, and we've seen through his eyes, and he has helped open all of our eyes about quite what the challenges are, and to really listen and to ask the tough questions and really engage around it. And I do think the pandemic has been an opportunity for us to make a major reset as companies, as leaders, and hopefully as society, so that we don't leave people behind. I do think we need a new vision that's just better. And on leadership, that requires that we aren't only making tough decisions, we're not only looking to the vision of what the future needs to be, but we're being compassionate, that we're being empathetic, that we're being caring, because otherwise I think we completely miss the point. And it's a balance between all these different factors. But I think this is an opportunity for all of us to have a voice of compassion and caring. This is a healthcare crisis, not of anybody's making. And we have to help those who are really challenged by it and do it together for better.
For those of you who are just joining the stream, this is Business Unusual, a live show where we're talking about the changing nature of work. I'm here with Citi President Jane Fraser talking about the future of finance. I want to say hello to some more members in the stream: Rashonda, George, Nadine, Kathy. Heidi says she's impressed at how Citi is taking care of its employees. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Jane, compassion, empathy. I think if you gave me 10 adjectives to describe a CEO before this pandemic, those wouldn't be two that a lot of people would list. Thinking about how the traits of a leader are going to change coming out of this crisis, what are your hopes in terms of what we're going to see from leadership and how they engage with their employees, their stakeholders out of this pandemic?
I honestly think it's exactly the same as what we were talking about before, that digital got supercharged. I think the impact of digitization is also getting supercharged, and that means you have to, the way that you lead an organization is different. It used to be command and control. You told people what to do and then made sure they did it. Today, the information is in, and the data is far more in the hands of the people far lower down in the organization. And it's much more about, as a leader, how do you empower them? How do you make sure that the decision making is down with them and not up at the higher layers of the organization, where frankly we may not be nearly as well informed, and we're further away from clients, we're further away from it. So it means you've got to flatten the organization. It means you've really got to listen. And be quiet as a leader and ask lots of questions, see where are the blind spots being missed. You have to provide the context for that decision making. And if you aren't authentic, and if you aren't curious, and if you aren't down to earth, I don't think you've got a prayer of succeeding, unless you're that very, very small percentage of people who are utterly extraordinary. Most of us in these roles, we aren't.
And I see a question in the stream about some of those potential blind spots. George is asking, what do you think about the main challenges of Citi to adapt to the supercharged digital world in terms of collaboration with fintech, new customer behaviors, and appealing to generations that perhaps will never visit a bank branch in their lives? George, is that really going to happen? Are my kids, I'm not pregnant, but in the future, are they not going to visit a bank branch, or what are we seeing?
It can be highly likely. I'm always surprised how many people actually do visit a bank branch to open their banking relationship and get the relationship started. But it's going to be different. We're all used to living on video. Your contact with the branch of the future may be probably through your iPad rather than actually the physical channels. But you're still going to need, hopefully, advisors on your saving and on your investment, how to help think about lending and not getting over indebted, how to manage your lives around it. So this notion of advice will be delivered differently, but it also very much needs to be professionalized, and that's going to be an important role for the banking system to continue. But yes, in the long run, I'm sure in the years to come, people will find branches quaint, but it's going to take a while before that's the case. I think we've got a generation to move before we get there.
Mm-hmm. Banking, of course, has had to adjust to this new digital world, but we're all adjusting in real time too. I'm curious, how has your style of organizing meetings, talking to employees, dealing with direct reports changed? Is there something that you were doing before the pandemic that worked in person that don't work now? We have so many questions from members in the stream always about just how to lead effectively right now. What did you kind of learn through this process?
I got a lot more courage through this process. I think I truly do believe that because being a woman has been a big advantage for me. And I think a point of strength. I am able to express opinions differently. I am able to talk about some more of the emotional and the so-called softer, I think they're hard, dimensions of running a business, and to do so, with vulnerability and authenticity around that, and not worry about it. So I feel like the real Jane turns up on the Zoom calls every day at work. And I'm the better for it. So I think this whole notion of being able to talk more openly about weaknesses, about challenges you're facing, about things you're doing wrong, having your son or your daughter run across the screen in the middle of a conference call. That is the real lives we're leading. It's not this Instagram perfect world. As a leader, I think it's good to be grounded like that.
I'm seeing some comments in the stream agreeing. Juana says, Jane, as a woman working for Citi, I admire your leadership style and hope one day to be just like you. Stephen says, proud to work for an institution that has been so proactive in ensuring safety first to their customers and employees. So Juana and Stephen, thank you for joining us on the show. Jane, you talk about this Instagram perfect life that's just being ripped to shreds as we all work from home and have these meetings with dogs and children and partners running in and out. But now we're seeing reports in the Wall Street Journal that productivity is waning as well, as this drags into, say, Google saying this is going to be something for them, at least until next summer. What are you seeing in terms of productivity, and how are you keeping employees engaged?
Yeah, it's been efficient, but I don't think it's effective in the long run, particularly again for banking, where it is more of this apprenticeship. The culture really matters, the togetherness, the belonging matters, as a bank, as opposed to some other institutions where that's less critical. So I do think in the long run that we are going to have to be investing even more into our cultures, into the sense of the purpose of what the company is really trying to achieve, and make sure that people belong when they walk in the front door or when they join the Zoom call. And investing in that's very important. We have a number of streams of work into the future of work that's looking pre the end of the pandemic and post, as to what's going to change and how do we make sure that the social fabric and the caring, the community spirit, and these different dimensions are very much fostered and nurtured. And the different affinity groups we have Citi Women, we have our Black Heritage affinity group, we have a family group, we have a huge number of different affinities. They're going to be playing an even more important role, I suspect, going forward in this more virtual world that we will, semi-virtual hybrid world, I suspect we'll live in the long run.
And with that, I want to remind our members in this stream about the poll that we have for today, which is about the long-term productivity of working from home. Sounds like Citi's Jane Fraser would vote A, but maybe with some proper support from employers. But what about you? Do you think that remote work is effective and sustainable long-term? A, yes, B, no, or C, are you on the fence? Please vote, but also let us know your comments and concerns in the stream as well. We'll reveal the results of the poll at the end of today's show. Jane, before I let you go, there's just so many people dealing with this heavy weight of the pandemic who are then having to come to the office and figure out how to put food on the table for their families. What is your advice to them, for those people who are struggling just to get through the workday right now?
I think part of it is, don't be afraid to ask for help and to be open about the struggles. We've seen it in terms of the importance of mental well-being. All of us face challenges in small ways, and then if you put financial worries, you put concerns on healthcare on top of that, it's very difficult. And I think it's one of, don't be ashamed, don't be afraid of just expressing the difficulties you're going through, asking for help, asking for sympathy, and asking for support. With the type of local communities we have in America are really wonderful. And that's an asset we should all be drawing upon.
I think that's great advice. Jane, it's always a pleasure sitting down with you, even if it has to be virtually now. I appreciate all your insights, and I know I speak for the stream for thanking you to joining us on Business Unusual.
Thank you very much indeed, Caroline. Thank you.
That was Citi President Jane Fraser talking us through how the banking world is going to change amid this crisis, what we can expect from CEOs is going to change as well, and her thoughts on how the pandemic is going to impact the future of leadership overall. I want to thank Jane for joining us on today's show. This is Business Unusual, a live show where we're talking about the changing nature of work. And I'm going to go ahead and reveal the results of today's poll, which is about the long-term productivity of working from home. 61% of you are saying, yes, this is something that you could do for quite some time. Ricky, Jody, Duncan, Harish, Janice, Hamaz, Nadine, and Devin, Leo, Philip, and Judy, thanks for voting. We have some no's from Gaurav, Rahman, and Apruva. And on the fence, Ken, Ioana, and Kathy, thank you all for voting. And it looks like we're pretty bullish about remote work and it being a long-term effective strategy. So thanks for voting on today's poll. This is Business Unusual, but tomorrow at noon Eastern, my colleague Andrew Seaman will be hosting Get Hired. It's our special Friday show dedicated to job seekers. He'll be speaking with Letitia Bird about career and talent development in this crazy job seeking environment. So be sure to tune in at the LinkedIn news page tomorrow at 12 Eastern. I'm Caroline Fairchild. Thank you so much for joining us.